We go now to the director of the White House National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
We took you literally. You said last Sunday you'd come back and talk to us about that household survey, the jobs picture. You said you really trust it. That report came out. It showed America added 64,000 jobs with unemployment ticking up to 4.6%. But we've seen analysis, including from the top economist at U.S. Navy Federal, saying the U.S. is in a, quote, hiring recession. Very few jobs being added since the spring, and wage gains are slowing. Are we in a hiring recession?
No, I don't think so. I think that basically the number was about what the market expected. It was a number that was less than 100, which is a little bit lower than you'd like. But then after that, we got the consumer price index numbers, which were really amazing. And so if you look at the 3-month moving average of core consumer prices, then they're running at an annual rate of about 1.6%, way below the Fed's target. And my old friend all the way back to grad school, Austin Goolsbee, is now one of the Fed governors voting on interest rates, conceded that they should have cut rates faster, and that he's going to do so in the future because of this inflation number.
Well, he was one of the dissenters when the Fed's decision
Correct.
came out. But when it comes to inflation, as you just referred to, that number showed there was still a rise in inflation. It was just at a slower pace than expected. If you pull out energy and pull out food, it rose at the slowest pace since 2021, up 2.6% in November from a year ago. But then there are quirks in here, because it looks like the prices weren't gathered until Thanksgiving. Discounts kicked in. There was no increase reflected in terms of housing costs. Why do you trust the data now when you haven't in the past?
Oh, you know, I think that you're right to always be suspicious about data, and it'll look a lot cleaner when we get a full survey, which we didn't have this time. But, you know, 2 of the 3 numbers, if we go back to the 3-month moving average, were fine. And so I think that the error band around the 1.6% inflation, about that's the pace it's running, is probably pretty tight. Surely there'll be some revisions, but I think the numbers are about right. And I usually, Margaret, don't like to go to year over year when we're talking about what's going on with inflation, because that includes a lot of high inflation Biden months in the back, and you know, fewer and fewer as we get, you know, further into the year. But I think that the trajectory right now is best seen by the 3-month moving average, and that's below 2, below the Fed target. So it means the Fed, as Austin Goolsbee said, has plenty of room to cut rates.
But the president said inflation has stopped. You'd acknowledge that's an exaggeration.
Well, I guess the inflation being above the target has stopped, for sure. And so, but inflation is not zero also. That's fair.
Okay, he did not give those caveats. He just said inflation has stopped. Kevin Hassett, stay with us. Welcome back to Face the Nation, and we continue our conversation now with the director of the White House National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett. This past week, we saw the president announce further changes to immigration policy. He halted diversity visas. There are now 39 countries on this travel ban or restricted list. This is in addition to all the deportations and revocations of asylum. The business community has made clear that the constant changes make it hard for them to plan, particularly in the small business category. They're concerned about a labor shortage, and we've seen the U.S. workforce lose more than 1 million foreign-born workers in the past year. Are you hearing those concerns from the business community?
Actually, it's the opposite. So in the sense that native-born workers are up more than 2 million. And so what we've seen is that as foreign-born workers, and a lot of them, don't forget, were illegal immigrants that have been deported, that when foreign-born workers depart, then it creates jobs for people who are native-born. The interesting thing, too, which I'd like to remind everybody, is that native-born Americans aren't necessarily racially distinct at all. And so the majority of the native-born jobs that have been created over the last year are Hispanic Americans. It's you know, just basically taking folks that are legally in the country and getting the jobs to them is what we see in the data.
Well, the Associated General Contractors of America didn't say they're replacing those workers easily. They're saying they're having a hard time doing that, and issued a statement saying it's a significant challenge, urging the administration to look at ways to expand the construction workforce and allow more people to lawfully enter the country.
Right. Well, one of the things we're seeing, this is exactly how markets work, right? So construction workers, their salaries this year have gone up by $3,300 on average, according to the latest report.
Because of the scarcity.
Well, but when the price goes up, then people say, "Oh, I should go." And I used to be a construction worker, but now I'm doing something else. I should go back to construction work because the salaries are so high. And so we're seeing a lot of that go on. And so we're very bullish on construction, and really happy to see that wages are going way back up. And so instead of having basically illegal people come in and take jobs away from native-born Americans at low wages, we're seeing people re-enter the labor force at high wages.
But to be clear, from the business community, part of the question is what is legal? Because you're changing the definition and pulling back asylum from some groups. So there's confusion at the constant change in policy. Will there be clarity in the new year?
Oh, there will definitely be clarity in the new year, and I think there's clarity now that what we've done is that we've made it so that people who are legally residents of the country and legally allowed to work, that they're basically top of the list when you're looking for somebody to hire.
Let me ask you a bit about tariffs. Since as far back as July, we have heard the president refer to this idea of $2,000 checks being given out to households. The Treasury Secretary said this would go to households making less than $100,000. Should Americans plan to receive those checks in 2026?
That's going to depend on what happens with Congress. Congress is going to have to send those money to those people. But the thing we can say is that since July, we've had a lot of positive news about the economy. We've had a couple of quarters of almost 4% growth. We've got a big government surplus, actually, running for a few months in a row. The deficit relative to last year is down by $600 billion. And so in the summer, I wasn't so sure that there was space for a check like that. But now I'm pretty sure that there is. And so I would expect that in the new year, the president will bring forth a proposal to Congress to make that happen.
So a new proposal for these, it's not necessarily coming from existing tariff revenue?
Oh, well, it could come from tariff revenue, but in the end, we get taxes, we get tariffs, we get also revenue from lots of places, and then Congress decides how to spend those monies. That's an appropriation. And so this would have to be money that would be an appropriation.
So don't bank on it, in other words. So are you projecting that in the new year, certain tariffs will remain in place, or do you see some of them going away?
I think that most of the tariffs that we've passed this year have proven their mettle. We've got still high growth, which people said we couldn't if we had tariffs. We have reduction in the deficit, reduction in the trade deficit. Imports from China are the lowest they've been since China entered the WTO. So there's a lot of success to crow about in the tariff space. But there are also things that we're hearing when we talk to people like trading partners and companies that trade a lot in the U.S. There are also things that maybe could be adjusted. You saw that we decided to exempt coffee, for example, because we don't make a lot of coffee in the U.S.
And coffee prices are up.
And I think that if there's something that's not made in the U.S. at all, that there's an appetite, and Jameson Greer is leading the effort to study these matters, that there's an appetite to exempt things if they're really not meant to be made in the U.S. because of, like climate or things like that.
You've also got the Supreme Court decision pending in terms of the specific IEEPA, as they're called. These are tariffs where the justification was citing fentanyl, Canadian crude, some Chinese imports. If the Supreme Court doesn't find in your favor, who gets the refund? Is it the companies or is it the consumers? How's that work?
Yeah, we really expect the Supreme Court is going to find with us. And I also think that if they didn't find with us, that it's going to be pretty unlikely that they're going to call for widespread refunds, because it would be an administrative problem to get those refunds out there. But basically, whoever paid the tariff, like actually cut the check to buy the thing, would be the person who would be getting the refund if there were one.
Doesn't the administration claim it was the country that paid that? You're saying the company.
It would be like I'm not talking about the incidence, right? So the incidence of the tariff. So in the end, who pays the tariff depends on elasticities of supply and demand. And we know that China cut the price a lot, so that the post-tariff price from Chinese goods is about what it was before the tariff. But the people who pay the tariff, if there is a refund, the people who actually paid for the good, the importer in most cases, they're the ones who'd be the first line of defense for refunding the tariff. But I really, really don't think that's going to happen. It'd be very complicated. And then that person would be responsible for allocating the tariff refund to the appropriate folks.
That sounds like a mess.
Yes, it is a mess. And that's why I
Okay.
think the Supreme Court wouldn't do it.
Well, we'll wait and see. I want to quickly ask you about the oil market. I asked you last Sunday about that decision to seize a tanker off the coast of Venezuela. We saw yet another one over the weekend. You said last Sunday it probably won't affect oil prices to be taking this oil off the black market. Do you stand by that? And was all that oil going to China?
Yeah, you know, I haven't been briefed on the latest. I did see that this is another ship that was basically operating in the black market. And so there's been a little bit of black market activity in the oil sector to go to sanctioned countries and to get them some oil. And they're getting that oil in order to avoid, you know, the reforms that we think would make the countries a better place. And so it's not a lot of oil compared to world supply. And so I don't think that people need to be worried here in the U.S. that the prices are going to go up because of these seizures of these ships. There's just a couple of them, and they were black market ships.
Were these sanctioned ships going to China?
I'm not sure where they were going.
All right. Kevin Hassett, thank you for your time. Have a
Thank
great
you.
holiday. We'll
You
be
too.
right back. UNICEF warns that more than 200 million children will require humanitarian assistance in the coming year. The largest crisis right now is Sudan. Catherine Russell, UNICEF's executive director, is just back from Sudan and South Sudan. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Margaret. How are you?
I'm well, but we want to draw attention here to those in need. And I know Secretary of State Marco Rubio just on Friday called for a cessation of hostilities. He said the U.S. is pushing for a humanitarian truce to allow some of these aid organizations to operate, but aid convoys have been struck on their way in, he also acknowledged. What kind of challenges are you facing?
Well, Sudan is at this moment the largest humanitarian crisis we're facing. And there are many things happening there. One is that children in particular, but people are on the move. Millions of people are moving around the country. We have hunger, extreme hunger, including famine designated in certain parts of the country. We're also seeing just horrific levels of violence, excuse me, including rape, including against children. UNICEF did a report about that about a year ago, even children under the age of 1. I mean, absolutely terrible stories. And a woman I met in Chad who had fled Darfur told me about the effort to sort of rape women in front of their families and their communities, really trying to terrorize them and videotaping it to humiliate them. And so the levels of violence are horrific. We have children out of school. So the bottom line here is that the needs are enormous. The challenges are just absolutely staggering. And I think the world needs to come together, you know, in the short term, for sure, we need better humanitarian access. We need to reach all of these communities. That's hard to do right now. But the truth is, Margaret, that what I heard from children across Sudan was the same thing, which is I would say to them, you know, what do you think about? What do you want? And they all said the same thing, which is we want peace. I think they understand that the only answer here really is to solve the political problems so that people can get back to some sort of a decent life.
Well, I don't want to let go what you just mentioned in terms of why something like that would be done to children and to women in front of their families. The term genocide is used in Sudan. What you are describing there in terms of treatment of gender-based violence, it sounds like you are saying that is an attempt to destroy a society by carrying out rape.
I mean, there are definitely atrocities that are intended to terrorize communities, to force them to move, to scare them. And, you know, they're effective strategies for sure. And I think you know, the world needs to take a look. I mean, Sudan, I know it seems so far away, and it is in many ways, but it is also a place where children are suffering so enormously. And I think especially, you know, now we're in the holiday season, you know, you want to think about, you know, people being with their families, all the rest of it. I mean, children in so many places are not having those sort of luxuries. They are really suffering. And I think the world needs to pay attention to that. And I commend Senator Rubio, Secretary Rubio now for pointing this out, because I think the key thing here is that we need attention to the problem.
Well, the U.S. has historically been the largest donor to UNICEF, but we've seen tremendous cuts by this administration, including a $142 million clawback of congressionally approved funds. Secretary Rubio said no one died from these aid cuts, and on Friday he said he's very proud of the changes that were made in foreign aid. Tell us what the reality is of the funding cuts.
The funding cuts are challenging, and I think the issue to understand is it's not just the United States. It's almost every donor, certainly to UNICEF, but to the UN system broadly and to the humanitarian sector. And so when you add all of those together, the impacts are really dramatic, because it means that what financial support we do get, we have to spread now over more places and with less support from donor countries. So I think there are certainly, there have been and will probably always be catastrophes that we're trying to deal with, and children are suffering. The United States has always proudly led, I think, on humanitarian response and on helping children. And, we're hopeful that some of the money that has been taken back will be restored to us. We continue to work with the State Department. There are efforts to fund a lot of the humanitarian and sort of life-saving work that we do. But really, the needs around the world are just absolutely enormous. And it's the United States and other donors who have to come in behind that, along with the private sector, I have to add. That is also an important piece of this puzzle.
And I should point out that the U.S. is one of the largest foreign aid donors to South Sudan, but that foreign aid is also under threat at this moment because of the government not complying with what the U.S. is demanding. Let me quickly.
South Sudan is a challenge. I was just there too, and that is, the government there needs to do a better job.
Quickly, before I let you go, Gaza, how are things improving?
Well, again, I would say thanks to the ceasefire and the administration here was critical on doing that. Things have gotten a bit better. We are able to move around better, but there's tremendous misery. The challenges remain. We have a lot of work that needs to get done. I mean, you've seen all of the images, the destruction. We still have serious levels of malnutrition. We are trying to get shelter in place. There's rain and just misery for children all around. So I think, I would say there definitely is progress with the ceasefire. God willing, that holds, and then we can continue to get more and more aid in there.
God willing, that holds, as you say. Catherine Russell, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Mike.
We'll be back in a moment. One of the highlights for Catholics in the U.S. this year was the selection of an American Pope, Pope Leo. We spoke Friday to the new head of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, Archbishop Paul Coakley. Father, I want to ask you about this role you have at the head of the Conference of Bishops. Last month, there was this urgent message. It was a very rare statement addressing concern for the evolving situation impacting migrants. And the language was pretty sharp in it. Quote, "We oppose the indiscriminate mass deportation of people. We pray for an end to dehumanizing rhetoric and violence, whether directed at immigrants or at law enforcement." What are bishops that you talk to seeing in parishes all around the country? What triggered this?
I think it varies from place to place, for sure. So in communities with a more dense migrant population, there's a great deal of fear and uncertainty, anxiety because of the level of rhetoric that is often employed when addressing issues around migration and the threats of deportation. So there's a lot of anxiety. So our pastors are trying to accompany people, walk with people, reassure people. And that's the message of the church, and that was the reason for our special message in November, that we're with you, we hear you, we're aware of your suffering and your fears, and we fully intend to accompany you during this difficult time.
So I know there have been bishops in places like Charlotte, in parts of California, who have formally granted permission, or dispensation is the word used, for people to skip Sunday Mass if they're afraid they could be targeted by ICE. Are you actually seeing a decline in the number of people attending Mass because they're afraid they'll be arrested?
We're not seeing that here in Oklahoma, and I haven't heard it reported widely from my brother bishops, so I know that that is the case in some places, but I don't think it's as common, at least here locally or in places that I have personal contact with. There's an anxiety, there's a fear, but I don't think it's kept people away in great numbers.
Mm-hmm. Well, this video that you released really got a lot of attention. It certainly got ours. And it mentioned being troubled by threats against the sanctity of houses of worship as well as hospitals and schools. You know, I spoke to the Vice President, J.D. Vance, last year and asked him about this change in policy that would allow for ICE to enter churches and schools. And he really pushed back hard. He says that the Catholic Church receives funds to help resettle immigrants. Thus, they are motivated by financial and not humanitarian reasons. Have you had any kind of conversation with the Trump administration, with the vice president, to explain what it is you're trying to say?
I have not had any personal conversations at this point with either the president or the vice president, so I look forward to engaging with them over matters of mutual concern, and certainly, undoubtedly, the question of immigration is going to come up. I think we have opportunities to work together. We have opportunities to speak frankly with one another. So I will look forward to that in the near future.
Well, the vice president calls himself a devout Catholic, which is also why I ask. I mean, what do you say to Catholics like him who argue that these hardline immigration policies have had a result that they sought, that the end justifies the means?
I don't think we can ever say that the end justifies the means. We have to treat everyone with respect, respecting the human dignity of every person. There's no conflict necessarily between advocating for safe and secure borders and treating people with respect and dignity. We always have to treat people with dignity, God-given dignity. The state doesn't award it, and the state can't take it away. So it's from the Creator. So I think as Christians, as believers, that's kind of a foundational bedrock thing for us, that people are to be respected and treated with dignity, whether they are documented or undocumented, whether they are here legally or illegally. They don't forfeit their human dignity.
Well, what is it that you think is causing that to be an issue right now? Why do you think that there is a loss of dignity? Are there specific policies that you are thinking of when you say that? Well,
not necessarily. I mean, to treat people with respect, to afford them due process, the deportations that are happening around the country. It's instilling, as I said, fear in a rather widespread manner. So I think that's something that concerns us all, that people have a right to live in security and without fear of random and of deportations. I think we're believers, of course, in due process. We have provisions in law that award due process to everyone. So that's what we are wanting to emphasize.
Mm-hmm. What would you advise others, other people of faith, to do for these immigrants?
Well, we are a nation of immigrants ourselves, so I think that's something that we as Americans need to always come back to. We are founded upon the immigrant experience. So I think we need to be generous in welcoming immigrants. We certainly have a right and a duty to respect borders of our nation, and I would say remind all of us that we have a right and a duty to respect sovereign borders of a state, but we also have a responsibility to welcome migrants. This is kind of a fundamental principle in Catholic social teaching regarding immigration and migration. People have a right to remain in their homeland, but they also ought to be allowed to migrate when conditions in their homeland are unsafe and necessitate moving to a place where they can find peace and security.
Archbishop Paul Coakley of Oklahoma City, thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we'll be right back. That's it for us today. We want to wish all our viewers a very happy holiday season and also want to give a big thank you to Washington Bureau Managing Editor Arden Farhi and Justice reporter Jake Rosen for all their work and their team's help sorting through the Epstein files. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.